Tributes continue to pour in, condolences for the family, celebrations of a life well lived, 84. I want to cut across to our guests this evening. I have Javed Ansari, senior journalist. I have Rashid Kidwai, who's also a senior journalist. I'm also being joined by Rahul Shrivastva, our national affairs editor. You know, Javed, would I be really wrong if I would call Pranab Da one of the statesmen of Indian politics who ended a spectacular career in politics as the president of the country?
Well, absolutely, without doubt. He was an institution and one of his kind. There aren't too many around. Pranab Da adorned all the offices that this country had to offer. But if there was one regret that he may have carried with him to his grave, it is perhaps that he never could become the Prime Minister of India. He believed that rightfully it should have been his, especially on two occasions, one after Mrs. Indira Gandhi's death and then when the UPA 1 and 2 came to power. But that was not to be. Even after he demitted our office, I have it on good authority, he nursed a desire. He wanted to emulate Rajgopalacharya, who after being the first Governor General of independent India went on to become the Chief Minister of Madras, of what was then Madras. He expressed a desire, but his party thought otherwise. There are many. I feel privileged that I had many occasions to interact with him. I shared an excellent rapport with him. I do remember on his last day as Citizen Mukherjee, before he went on to become President of India, he was giving interviews and we were slotted at times. Each channel was slotted 2 minutes. I went up to him and I told him, Dada, 2 is not enough. He says, okay, let's start. And he gave me a 10, 12-minute long interview. At the end of which my last question was, Dada, we will miss you. He says, I will miss India today, I will miss the viewers of India today, and I will miss you. And anyway, I won't be too far away. You can always call me. And we did call him. I was also at the receiving end of his scolding, because he had a soda water like temper. He was lose it easily and calm down even quicker. Pranab Mukherjee was an amazing man. And at the time when I used to work for BBC Hindi Service Radio, I actually interviewed him in Hindi. And all my colleagues, everybody was rolling over in laughter. Dada was struggling with his Hindi, but yet he wanted to oblige me, and he did it. And he gave that interview. He was an amazing person. You could call him at 2 o'clock at night to add to your knowledge, to provide a perspective, and he was very willing. But he used to get angry if you pried into details. He'd give you the decision that was taken, and the moment you ask, sir, but who said what and what did that say? He says, look here, gentlemen, that is not your business. You are a news person, report the news, leave out the details. So that was Pranab Mukherjee, an amazing man. He will be missed by many. I will certainly miss him.
You know, Javed, stay on with us. I want to quickly cut across to Mr. Kidwai. Mr. Kidwai, taking off from what Javed said, that possibly, one of the regrets that he would have had would be not being Prime Minister. Why is it said? You know, for a young journalist like I, every time I read, it's always said that he was always the best Prime Minister we never had. Why was it said?
Preeti, I think he was aware of his limitations. He gave an interview in 2001 where he said, he would not become, Prime Minister of India ever. And he cited 3 reasons. He said he is not a Hindi speaker, and he does not have a mass following. He is not like Jyoti Basu or Mamata Banerjee. He gave all those names. And third thing, he said that at that point of time he had not won any direct election. In 2004, of course, he won Lok Sabha election. So I think he was aware of it. He was a politician among politicians. He was a man of flesh and blood. Very few people are aware that that informal coup that was staged to throw out Sitaram Kesri and bring Sonia Gandhi, he was a mastermind. He was a defender of emergency. He was a very close associate of Indira Gandhi and Sanjay Gandhi. And he did it. I mean, it was not that, he regretted doing it. So I think when we say in a very glowing tone, and today is a day, of course, to remember him, but he was also, a politician. He could grasp that situation very well. Just one instance, I remember that, the day UPA was taking over and I was there, you see, and it was his name was doing as someone who would become, Home Minister. And when somebody broke news to him that he's going to become Defense Minister, within a minute, he did not. He just drank a glass of water and he said, connect me to a Defense Secretary. So, he seldom showed his emotions, but I think he was obviously an ambitious man.
Right. Stay with me, Mr. Kidwai. I want to bring in Rahul Shrivastva as well. Rahul, I'd like to ask you the same question because I've been trying to read up so much on him. You've had the privilege of also tracking him as a journalist. And the question I want to ask you, Rahul, why is it said that he was the best prime minister that India never had?
Yes, Preeti, there are several reasons. I think the Congress also had its own problem vis-a-vis who became prime minister was not going to be decided by who was a senior leader, but also the fact that what were the equations with the family and whether he was from the family or not. But I think Prime Minister Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, I think the element about him was that he was indispensable. People talk about his elephantine memory. What they don't realize that he was a very hard worker. I had asked him once that how do you remember what was the budget expenditure in 1969? He said, because unlike all of you lazy young men, I go back home and I write the day's memoirs in a diary. Now that's where meticulous comes in. The man who could not become the prime minister at a time when Manmohan Singh was rarely speaking and was called by the BJP a weak prime minister, he held a disparate coalition by heading nearly 102 group of ministers and committees at one time. Preeti, 102. There was aviation, there was Ram Setu, and there was virtually everything under the sun that the government has to deal with was under Pranab Mukherjee. And he was dealing with some very difficult coalition partners. One day there is a little corridor behind the Prime Minister's office in Parliament. And we usually used to hang around there just to listen or try to catch hold of Dr. Manmohan Singh. So one day there was this conversation going on between the Prime Minister and Mr. Pranab Mukherjee. There was a group of ministers on Ram Setu in which the DMK was being very difficult. So we could hear Pranab Mukherjee telling, the Prime Minister asking what happened in the GM. So he said, I told XYZ minister to shut up. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is known for his silence, could not ever believe, never might have said shut up to anybody, asked him. Then he says, I also told the minister that I know India much better. That's what was Pranab Mukherjee all about. He commanded respect because he was not a mass leader, but he had become indispensable, and only because of his grit and hard work.
Stay with me, Rahul, because we're going to continue to talk about anecdotes. We're going to continue to talk about a legacy that will endure on decades to come. I want to go across back to Javed. Javed, at this time, around last year, if I'm not wrong, exactly around this time, give and take a few days, he was awarded the Bharat Ratna. Today we've lost him, but like I said, the legacy endures. For people not well attuned to the legacy of Pranab Da, for somebody who's tracked his career, what would you think would be Pranab Da's hallmark political moments?
His unwavering belief in Nehru's vision of India, his absolute and complete devotion and commitment to the constitutional scheme of things. When he became president, I asked him, I said, Dada, what kind of president do you see? He says, I'll be a constitutional president. And in my view, there is no room for an activist president. You have to be a conformist, and you need to ensure that nobody rocks the boat. You need to ensure that things go on smoothly. And, when he became president, his relations with his party went a bit south because they expected that, he would stand up to the Narendra Modi dispensation or he would question things. His own view was that I'm a constitutional authority. I've left my party affiliations for the time being in suspended animation. I need to follow the constitution. He was a great devotee of the Westminster style of functioning. And again, I will narrate an anecdote. He had a quick temper, and not only did he lose it with the opposition or with his colleagues or with journalists. Once Khalida Zia came visiting, and there was this cross-border, a lot of anti-India elements that had short shelter in Bangladesh. They were using that territory to indulge in activities inimical to us. Pranab Mukherjee was the interlocutor talking to her, and she kept denying. And at one point of time, the famous Pranab Mukherjee temper was on display. He says, so I believe you. They came from us. They didn't come from Bangladesh. They didn't come from Pakistan. They came from us, and I believe you. And then he suddenly realized that he was speaking to a foreign dignitary, and immediately recovered and composed himself and started speaking to her in Bengali and disarmed her. He also had strong Bangladesh connections in the sense that his wife was from there and he was regarded as the son-in-law of Bangladesh. Pranab Mukherjee had an encyclopedic memory. He was the go-to man, especially as far in UPA 1 and UPA 2. And one of the reasons that Mrs. Gandhi was reluctant to make him Prime Minister was to send him to Rashtrapati Bhavan was that she told him, I said, with you gone, who's going to run the ship? Who's going to deal with you? And he said, at some point of time I won't be around. You'll have to find a replacement. Why not begin at a time when I'm still around and I can lend an helping hand?
Appreciate you all for joining us, because we're going to continue to talk about former President Bharat Ratna Pranab Mukherjee.